All suffering is the result of sin. It all goes back to the Garden of Eden when Adam and Eve disobeyed God and sin entered into the world. So we suffer because of our own sin. We suffer because of the sin of others. Or we suffer because we live in a fallen world that has been corrupted by sin, and it's really no one's fault. That seems to be the case with the coronavirus and the death and suffering it causes. We live in a world where viruses mutate and become deadly because creation itself has been corrupted by sin. In a previous devotion, I said that God uses suffering to bless Christians by using it to make them more like Jesus Christ. God also uses suffering for non-Christians by leading them to Jesus Christ. If we live in a suffering-free world and we're all sinners, is that a good thing? If we all sin, and if a person doesn't trust in Jesus Christ and ends up eternally condemned by God, then living in a suffering-free world would be a horror. Why do I say that? If people disobeyed God but lived in a suffering-free world, what would alert them to their need for God? What would convince them that they need to change? Suffering makes it clear that something's wrong with this world. We all intuitively think that the world should be harmonious and just and fair and free from suffering. And the reason we think that is because God has planted within us a desire for heaven, and that's what heaven is like. It's a short step from realizing that there's something wrong with this world to realizing that there's something wrong with me. Suffering forces me to realize that I'm not self-sufficient. I'm not all-wise. I'm not all-capable. There are things I can't do and needs I can't meet. And because of that, maybe I'll begin to realize that I need deliverance, that I need someone to rescue me. C.S. Lewis famously said this. He said, "God whispers to us in our pleasures, speaks in our consciences, but shouts in our pains. It is His megaphone to rouse a deaf world." Suffering is a severe mercy. Severe because suffering can be terrible. A mercy because suffering may cause me to turn to God, to the only one who can truly help me. No suffering in this world, can compare with the terrible suffering of someone who spends eternity apart from God. If suffering in this world can cause people to turn to Jesus Christ in faith, then that is a mercy from God. And as hard as it may be to see it or to believe it, widespread suffering is actually a blessing from God because it can save us from a more terrible tragedy.